unity forever, as the union makes us strong.
Even as they are traumatized and living in fear, domestic workers have always risen up to the workers' anthem.
Coming in the union, women are coming in the union, women are coming in the union, women are coming.
Nakubura Sise, a returning migrant domestic worker from Oman, could not hold back her tears as memories for her tormentors blurred her mind while explaining her ordeal to journalists.
Nebayogera nange nemba olubuto nga ndusibwa mu kigoye ng'ekiro omukamba mpaka mubake nga sisobola ngamba mpaka mubake ng'emirimu ngikola sirina maanyi kuba nabisi. Kati sisita wange yagenda nga ku ofiisi nga bamulimba n'abagamba bannange omwana muze wakiri n'akola ssente ze bana bamugisiza nga mbasatto nemukole ekyo.
She was tortured, starved and denied treatment plus her salary, even when she spent sleepless days and nights with the Arab host family in Oman.
Gwaggwako ninda omusaala gwange wayita nga ennaku nyanga guweddeko ne mbagamba omusaala gwange ne baŋŋamba okyalina okukola omwezi ogwokubiri guggweko, awo omwezi ogwokusatu wonna okumala kubasooke bakusasula essente. Ne ŋŋamba bannange naye nga nkosebwa naye nga ninda bantwale ku medical kuba medical bagikolera ng'omaze okukola emyezi 2.
Irina Banja is another migrant domestic worker who survived death while in United Arab Emirates. The rupture of her backbone is costing her a lot on treatment.
In the hospital, then they did the X-ray and they saw that I had broken the backbone. The backbone, even the left leg, the ankle.
I'm a unionist, I'm a unionist, I'm a unionist.
This is the case as 52 African countries have failed to ratify to the International Labour Organization Convention 189 that is required to trigger governments to set up policies that will protect the rights of workers.
I'm telling you, only 2 countries have ratified Convention 189. That is South Africa and Mauritius. Others are just going around and around. That's why we as IDWF and especially Domestic Workers Organization Network in Africa, we are still campaigning because in 2011, in June, the government countries were the first to campaign and to fight that Convention 189 is being ratified. Now we are wondering, why are they going slow? Why are they going back? They are not even championing, because the most sufferers in these are domestic workers in Africa, looking at the working conditions, which are very poor.
The Secretary General, Uganda Hotels, Food Tourism, Supermarkets and Allied Workers Union, Stephen Mugole, has appealed to government to maintain the ban slapped on agencies recruiting migrant domestic workers to the Gulf states before finalizing with the labor policy for migrant domestic workers.
As the government has committed itself to us that before they lift the ban on migrant domestic work, stringent guidelines shall be put in place. Those guidelines, I'm very sure that they are not yet finalized, because if they are to be finalized, though it is the government which is at the forefront, the union that is responsible for domestic workers must also put in its input.
The Director for Labour at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Industrial Relations, Martin Wandera, says government has pledged total commitment to uphold rights of the labour force.
Of the people I call the unsung heroes or heroines of this world. Many never realize that offices, industry, and many other workplaces outside the home are able to operate productively because of domestic workers. Just imagine if domestic workers decided not to work for one day, how many women would stay at home? Of course, the men never care that much. They will still go to work. But the reason why many women are increasingly going to work is because of these unsung heroines.
Meanwhile, the principal labor officer at the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Nuriyat Nabiwande, says that guidelines to the exportation of labor force to the Gulf region will soon be finalized.
Uplifting it, we are supposed to come up with guidelines, and we can't have guidelines in Uganda that can't meet the standards the other side. So they are negotiating. In fact, it was mentioned that I was in a regional workshop. One of the areas that we discussed was we can have good laws this side, but our laws don't govern the other side. So at the end of the day, we come up with bilateral agreements.
The Assistant General Secretary, UHT Union, in charge of domestic workers, Assumpta Namaganda, decries the slow adoption of labor laws, especially those concerning the rights of domestic workers.
While she was there. So those are the situations that migrant domestic workers, Ugandans, are going through. This young girl has gone through a lot. And she's not the only one. This is the only evidence we can bring you today, right now. But there are other cases, and we have presented them to the Director of Labor, but the agencies and the government is not realizing that. That is, they are not realizing it. They keep pushing because they want the money. And involve the trade unions, please. Because we are the ones who keep suffering with these workers. They are brought back, but they keep suffering. They have ailments going on, and they keep coming back to us.
The International Domestic Workers Federation has made a Kampala declaration calling for action on the plight of migrant domestic workers.
Growing struggles and challenges of precarity and exploitation faced by migrant domestic workers in Uganda. This crisis is increasingly becoming a concern in many other African countries, such as South Africa, Namibia, Zambia, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, and Malawi. The situation of migrant domestic workers has been absent from mainstream employment discourse, even though hundreds of domestic workers continue to be smuggled and cheated into taking up seemingly lucrative employment overseas, which often turns out to be a deception. Many such migrant workers end up physically, financially, and mentally abused, while others lose their lives or return home with illnesses.
Domestic workers under the Organization of Uganda Hotels, Food, Tourism, Supermarkets and Allied Workers Union are on a nationwide collection of signatures to legalize their agenda themed My Fair Home, and are petitioning governments to ratify to the Convention 189, which will trigger member states to pass laws and policies to protect the domestic labor rights.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. As the union makes us strong.
It's also not at variance with the different labor laws. So I would see no reason why a country like Uganda, with a good record of ratifying worker-related conventions, does not ratify Convention 189.
It is South Africa and Mauritius. All of us who voted for, who were the champion, now we are not voting, our government. It is very shameful sometimes.
You can only domesticate it after ratification. It has not yet been ratified because of reason of government is saying they need to review the Employment Act to first of all include even the domestic workers issues and whatever, so that by the time they ratify, on the ground there must be seeds sown to show that really what they approved in ILO in Geneva during that 100th session in regard to ratification of this convention, that they will walk the talk.
Douglas SSETTUMBA compiled this report for UBC News.